Greetings, everybody. It is the 12th of November, 2020, or yeah, 12th of November, 2021. Um, I would say one of the most pressing things happening right now is possibly the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And I'd like to hit a few points. I'm not going to try to quote any doctrine. I'm not going to try to quote any legal papers or whatnot, or the semantics as far as all the what if scenarios, the potential what if scenarios. I'm just going to take the common person approach. Uh, with that being said, I've been doing these videos for almost a year now. I think if I go back and I look at the original video I posted, I've been doing this for about a year now, and I've been fortunate to have a couple of people kind of keep up with my videos. Unfortunately, as much as I appreciate them keeping up with my videos, part of the intent was to see if I can solicit and elicit people with differing point of views. The majority of the majority of people who do occasionally watch my videos are friends of mine who share similar views, and we're not gonna increase discourse and increase conversation if it's like-minded people having the same conversations about stuff they already agree upon. The goal is to try to reach out to people who may not agree on certain topics and try to find a way to communicate and bridge gaps versus left and right, conservative and liberal, Democrat, Republican, whatever the case may be. So, setting that foundation, let's get back to this Kyle Rittenhouse thing, and let's try to keep it belligerently simple. All right, at the crux, what you have is the hyper sensationalized situation over Jacob Blake, coming on the heels of the events that took place in Minneapolis with oh Christ, I know what were all the names? They're going to be on the George Floyd and the white police officer involved, Derek Chauvin, I believe. And how politicized that was, and we could argue on a separate note. I think I even made a different video as to whether or not Chauvin got the verdict he deserved, whether the jury was manipulated by the media, etc. So coming off the heels of that, you have Jacob Blake, who, for all intents and purposes, removed the skin color from the equation. If you can remove skin color from the equation and you just judge a person based on their merits, Jacob Blake, at this point in his life, is a douchebag. Jacob Blake, at this point in his life, is a bad person. All right? He was violating a restraining order. He was basically giving a woman enough fear for her own personal safety that she is the one who called the cops. And again, let's try to remove color from this, right? The woman in question was black. Jacob Blake is black, whatever. The cops that responded could have been anything, but they just happened to be white. Long story short is Jacob Blake puts himself in a situation where he's now threatening the cops. And the cops have no other course but to defend themselves, to make sure that they can go home. As somebody who's never served in law enforcement, but served in the military, and has been in numerous circumstances where I have a choice. Judged by 12 or carried by 6. In one case, I get to go home to my family. In another case, I'm brought home to my family. So the cops reacted how they felt appropriate, and then what ends up happening is, in direct response to all of that jackassery and nonsense, political officials in the Kenosha, Wisconsin area basically handcuff the local law enforcement capability, the local cops, the sheriffs, whatever, tell them to more or less stand down, and then Kenosha erupts into chaos. You have this young 17-year-old. I don't know if he was out of high school yet or not. I don't know where he was in his life. I haven't researched it. Don't really care to. He's from Antioch, Illinois. I'd have to look on a map as to how close Antioch is to Kenosha, but apparently it's the equivalent of one side of the street is Antioch, the other side of the street is Wisconsin. So the majority of whatever he did was in Kenosha. The majority of all of his interactions were in Kenosha. He had some medical training. Apparently, he was looking at some sort of first responder service, just Yeah, I think there's an age limitation to when you can become a first responder. And because of the lack of law enforcement, local businesses had to request assistance from the local community. Thus, the whole reason we have the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms and to form militias for our own protection, to include protection from the government. People tend to forget this. They don't seem to understand it. They don't care. All they look at is guns go boom and people die. That's not entirely accurate, but it is what it is. So he also happens to be white. So the major focus coming from the media sources, all right, the overwhelming majority of media is left-leaning, or if you're watching me, it's over that way. So it's left-leaning, all right, with an extremely small majority, or a small portion, a small minority being right-leaning, as in, quite frankly, nobody's in the center, all right? So you either have this tiny minority of right-leaning news media and this large majority of left-leaning news media. Not to mention when your own, at the time, presidential candidate, now current president, goes on record of accusing Kyle Rittenhouse of racism and white supremacism and whatnot. That is direct character slander. And I'd have to look it up, but there's two laws. There's slander and libel, and defamation of character, where things that you say, do, and publish can, if they adversely affect somebody without proof, with whatever, you just make it up, you just make accusations, where you can be held accountable for those actions. So several left-leaning news outlets, to include Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and several others for that matter, to include the LeBron Jameses of the world, have made numerous comments about Kyle Rittenhouse without any facts, without any researched information. And specifically, let me pause for a moment. At the risk of repeating myself, at the risk of saying the same thing over and over again, I had to come to terms with the fact that there's a reason for it. All right? The reason why these things keep repeating themselves is because they keep happening without change. You have media outlets who are either controlled, owned, whatever the case may be, by left-leaning people that are constantly pushing an excessive left-leaning agenda. All right? Whether it's Don Lemon, Joy Ann Reid, Von Jackson, Minka Kelly, Jeffrey Toobin, who's the other one? Brian Stelter, whatever. You have these people that are basically creating artificial facts. They're creating false information, publishing it as factual information, generating fear, generating anger for the sole purpose of ratings. Now, what concerns me is everything that took place in Wisconsin, in Kenosha, was a direct result of this fear-mongering, of this placating on anger and fear and white guilt and police this and whatever the case may be. And that directly led to the events. All of the media bias, all of the media reporting, all of the hyper-politicization of certain topics, and the way that Democratic and or left-leaning elected officials have continuously handled things, you had a riot. You had chaos. And again, if you go back and you watch footage, these left-leaning people, oh no, it was a protest. No, protests are peaceful. Protests are nothing more than people gathering, whether they march, whether they walk, or whether they stay put. This is our opinion. This is our opinion. That's a protest. That's all it is. Protests don't involve fires. Protests don't involve firearms. Protests don't involve violence. What was happening in Kenosha was not a protest. So this young man who does most of his activity on the other side of the border in Kenosha is out there trying to serve the public. He's putting out fires, he's rendering first aid, and he's brandishing an AR-15 that was purchased by a Wisconsin resident, maintained at the residence of said Wisconsin resident, but then given to Rittenhouse for the purpose of self-defense so that he could defend himself in this chaos where there's already been known violence. One thing leads to another as the night progresses. One thing leads to another, and at some point in time, Kyle Rittenhouse is attacked not just once, but on multiple occasions. On both occasions, he was forced to defend himself with the only means of defense that he had. He did not have any less than lethal means. He did not have the ability to stun people. He did not have pepper spray. All he had was his AR-15, which is a constitutional right afforded to him as an American. Now, separately, we can argue age. Separately, we can argue his state of residence. All right? We can argue those separately. As a human being, as somebody who had the God-given gift of being born an American, he is defending his life against 3 legitimate threats. 2 of those result in manslaughter. A convicted pedophile rapist who was somehow transferred from a detention facility to an insane asylum or a hospital for those that are lacking in capacity, who was released that very same day, is out, taking advantage of the situation, is chasing Rittenhouse for the sole purpose of attempting to do grievous bodily harm and or death. For all Kyle knew, he was trying to rape him. Kyle Rittenhouse, once his weapon is attempted to be taken from him, he shoots the assailant. Not victim, assailant. Defending his own life. Done. Done. As he continues to try to evade this situation and get to what he feels is safe, like the presence of law enforcement, he is again attacked by a mob. All right, and this is, the video footage supports itself. I'm not making things up. I'm not using hyperbole. I'm not using intense language or hyperbolic language. All right? According to federal statutes, a mob consists of 3 or more persons with ill intent. Look it up. Fact check me. Don't give a fuck. I got you. I got you for days on this one, motherfucker. So he is attacked by a mob. All right? When he is in a position to defend himself against the mob, he shoots another assailant, resulting in his eventual death. This person, I do believe, was the one attacking him with a skateboard. Anybody who's ever come in contact with a skateboard, ridden a skateboard, understands you have the deck, the trucks, and the wheels. Skateboard can be used as a deadly weapon. All right, if applied to the right area of the body under the right conditions, a skateboard can be a deadly weapon. He was hit twice by the skateboard. He had already been kicked in the face. So once he identifies an assailant, he engages that assailant accurately, removes that assailant as a threat. Another assailant comes at him. This guy's already a convicted felon, which I'd have to look at the Wisconsin state laws, but now he's brandishing a Glock pistol. All right? The moment he aims this pistol at Kyle Rittenhouse takes one shot at him. That shot impacted the bicep and caused damage to the bicep, but ultimately this individual either let go of or whatever, was no longer a threat to Kyle. You have a convicted felon brandishing a weapon, though, all right? Last time I checked, majority of convicted felons aren't allowed to maintain and or brandish firearms, so his possession of a firearm is already illegal in my book. But he's already admitted on the stand that he basically was going after Kyle, all right? Regardless of what kind of excuse he gives to church up the situation. What amazes me, and I've made several videos on this subject. I've made videos talking about media bias. I've made videos talking about media bias and the falsification or the extreme misinformation to support a narrative, and then questioning what that narrative is. Okay, what is the direction you're trying to take this narrative? Are you trying to get us to reach a point where we have another civil war, or are you trying to push us in the direction of the purge? Art imitating life, life imitating art. what is your overall goal? What is your checkmate chess move, right? And then I also look at things from the view of Kyle Rittenhouse, who's on defense for his life. All right? And people are arguing, well, he shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have been there. At this point, it's negligible because you have three individuals who were clearly up to no good, who had zero positive intent, taking advantage of a situation. Something was going to happen to somebody regardless. All right? But you have this narrative being painted. You have these things being said. Look at the kid that was wearing the Trump hat down in D.C., and the Native American was pounding the drum or whatnot, Nick Sandman or whatever. He had to eventually sue media outlets for slander and libel or whatnot, defamation of character because of what they said about him. And I think he was doxxed. People were putting out his address and whatnot. So there's been reports that the brother of George Floyd has people there taking photos of the jury so that they can threaten the jury and manipulate the jury to get the results that they want. Secondly, you have a prosecutor who has demonstrated nothing but ineptitude, which makes me wonder if the prosecutor is acting like Brad Pitt from The Sleepers, where he's purposely trying to lose this case. Either that or he was woefully ill-equipped to adjudicate this case, or he's just flat out inept and should be disbarred for after maybe going to a competency review board to review his competency of law. But if Kyle Rittenhouse walks, there's going to be jackassery afoot. Just something bad will happen if he walks. But if he walks, regardless of why, mistrial, whatever, I believe his attorneys have a case to sue the sitting president, the sitting vice president, and sue media outlets for slander and libel, possibly defamation of character, and in the event that others act upon it, threats to himself. If people are threatening him, his physical well-being, and or his family. Then I think, whether it's BLM, the brother of George Floyd, or whatever, whatever the charges are, jury tampering, or whatever the case may be, I think there should be charges for that should not be ignored by any Department of Justice of any kind. And if this goes differently because the jury was swayed from the beginning based on the political narrative of the left-leaning news media, I think you're going to have jackassery afoot. So I think the unfortunate truth is, somewhere in that area, if not other areas of this country, regardless of which way this goes, you're going to have jackassery afoot. At the end of the day, I think it's clear-cut self-defense, and then I think there should be follow-on lawsuits for slander and libel. If you disagree, by all means communicate that with me. If you want to have a separate discussion about him being there, his age, his brandishing the AR-15, we can have that discussion separate. All right? But I'm happy to have these discussions. I think this is a clear case of self-defense. I don't think this has anything to do with racism. I don't think this has anything to do with white supremacy. I don't think this has anything to do with Republican or Democrat as far as the actions of Kyle Rittenhouse goes. And I also think he has a case to sue people for slandering his character, defaming his character, as well as whatever liable statutes are out there for basically everything they've said against him prior to everything going to trial. And I think we should also have a thorough investigation of the FBI, because the FBI is comprised of compartmentalized layers. And I think somewhere within the Department of Justice as well as the FBI, there may be a failure somewhere of people doing their jobs accordingly. The average, everyday FBI agent working cases, attempting to solve crimes, I think is not in question. And I think Steven Crowder said it best maybe, it's the people that work behind desks, shuffling papers, coming up with reasons to do certain things. I think maybe we need to have a review there, because the fact that the FBI had drone footage that I don't think I even knew about until this trial astonishes me, which means the FBI purposely had a drone over Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm just going to leave it at that. You guys know the deal. If you see this video, if you've made it this far, 20 minutes deep, I apologize. I tried to make this short, but I'm a long-winded prick. Get involved. Leave a comment, whether on YouTube, leave a comment on Facebook, leave a comment on Instagram. Text me, message me if you know who I am. And let's try to have these conversations. I'm going to try to poke the bear a little bit. A buddy of mine, I believe his wife said that 41 counties or something flipped blue in Georgia and was like, yay! And my initial instinct was, wow, Georgia's going straight to shit. Like Georgia's just become a toilet because it's starting to fill up with turds. So I'm going to poke the bear a little bit and see if my friend's wife wants to have an exchange of ideas and concepts and see if maybe we can find some common ground or find out where we differ and find out why we differ. But until then, I'll see you later.